Welcome to my final project walkthrough. My project is called Back to the Drawing Board, the Race for Mid-Decade Redistricting, and there's a QR code here to access the project. I'm first going to look at a few examples of previous news coverage of my topic, which is mid-decade redistricting. These are some examples by NPR and the Texas Tribune showing the way that the new like redistricting, mid-decade redistricting that's been happening has been covered. Hi, and welcome to my final project video walkthrough. My project is called Back to the Drawing Board, the Race for Mid-Decade Redistricting. My project covers the mid-decade congressional redistricting that's currently happening across the country. I'm focusing primarily on Texas, but also trying to contextualize it within the broader kind of political system. And my main goal for the project was to provide something new and different compared to other news coverage of the subject. So this is an example of some news coverage from NPR and the Texas Tribune of the mid-decade redistricting and gerrymandering that's been happening. And my goal was really to do two things, to provide more interactivity, and then also to provide kind of a closer analysis at the way that the boundaries are changing, especially compared to demographic data. And so this is my project. When you enter it, you have this little title section here. These are actually all the states that are either considering redistricting or have passed new maps, and the opacity represents kind of how far along they are in that process. And then just to get right into it, we have the first chart here. This is one of two kind of author-driven scrolly telling blocks where I tell the story of the history of redistricting in Texas specifically. So this is looking at districts in Texas and their kind of partisan scores. As you scroll through, the story begins in 2003 when Texas drew new maps. It was not a census year, so it was another kind of mid-decade redistricting event. And this map actually ended up in the Supreme Court in 2006, which is why so many people have actually been comparing what's happening today in Texas back to what happened in 2003. And so I thought it would be important to kind of contextualize what's happening today with this historical example, because I also haven't really seen that done as much. And so as you scroll through, you get to learn a little bit more about what happened in 2003. And then you actually enter this kind of map view where you get to really understand what happened specifically with District 23, which is the district that was ruled unconstitutional in 2006. I thought that this sort of like stepwise way of walking through the changes would be really helpful as opposed to just having it traditionally laid out on the page, because seeing the changes isolated one by one, I thought would make it a lot more powerful, but also kind of easier to see the differences, like if you're scrolling up and down here between the districts. And then there's a closer look here, specifically zooming in around San Antonio. Again, kind of you get to see the difference compared to this is showing the Hispanic population in Texas. And then as you keep going, you then get kind of let back out into this original chart, but now it's in its interactive form. So you can scroll through and look at each Congress. And then if there is a redistricting event during that Congress, during one of those 2 years, information about that redistricting event will pop up on the side. Then as you keep going, now you enter the first interactive block, which is a puzzle. I have the puzzle already completed here just so that we can see that after you complete it, you get to do this sort of mouse over effect where you can compare the districts and then you get to see their change in this chart. You'll notice that the chart here looks quite similar to the chart from NPR because I had a different one, but I really, really like the NPR layout. And so I thought I would kind of challenge myself to make an interactive version of it that dynamically updates with the puzzle. And I'm going to go ahead and reload this so that we can take a look at the puzzle here. You can drag and drop the districts to complete the puzzle, or if you get stuck or you don't want to, then there's an animate solution button. And once you press that button, it'll fill out the rest of the puzzle for you, but it'll show you the changes between the old map and the new map as the puzzle is animating. So we can let that run. Again, you'll see the yellow up here is kind of outlining the differences. And then again, you can hover over and then it's also pointing out these three districts are super important because they went for Harris in 2024, but theoretically would have gone for Trump in 2024, and are also likely to switch to having Republican congressmen next year in the primaries. As you keep scrolling, you then enter another kind of scrolly telling map view that mirrors the one from earlier, but this is focused on the current year rather than 2003. So again, there's demographic data here from the census, and then you really get a good look at the differences between the two maps. This view, for example, shows the same districts in the old and new maps, and then you get a better sense when you keep going of how these districts cover entirely different geographic areas. District 9, for example, only has 3% of the same population, and then you can keep going here and compare across demographic data. And then it ends with one last interactive. Here, you are trying to do some redistricting and create an unlikely victory situation. So here, Party A has fewer precincts than Party B, and you're trying to make three districts, and your goal is to make Party A win. There's a few different solutions, but you get to kind of pick a district and then select whatever precincts you want to go in that district, and then you can see them populate here, and you can submit your answers when you're done. My goal with this interactive and the interactive up here with the puzzle was really to give readers this kind of up close and personal experience with the information, but also to convey a sense of like how gamified and arbitrary the districts are, and that it has so much power to completely shape American politics, and yet it really is just like drawing on a map. And so there's a lot of like subjective decision making that goes on behind the scenes and drawing the districts, and yet it's so powerful. And I thought it'd be interesting to kind of turn that into a gamified experience. But then I think mixed with this sort of like stepwise information, that it is actually pretty powerful for like leaving the article and feeling like you really have a good sense of what is going on with the kind of mix between hands-on activities and then the instruction here, which kind of mirrors almost like a classroom experience. This puzzle does not have an automated solution, although that is something that I'm thinking about adding in the future. And then I have my sources down at the bottom.